And now we're going to talk about the death penalty. For many years, England, in common with most of the world, had a death penalty. Times were uncertain, justice was harsh, life was harsh. As a result of a number of cases, Craig and Bentley being one of them, the let him have it case, the execution of Ruth Ellis, the last woman to have been executed, and the Timothy Evans case, the feeling was within political society, and indeed within society as a whole, that this was inherently wrong. That because we are human and make mistakes, the law could not be permitted to impose the ultimate sanction, because the law just might get it wrong. And indeed, in the Timothy Evans case, that's the 10 Riddington Place murders, the law undoubtedly did get it wrong. A man called John Christie was responsible for at least one of the murders for which Timothy Evans was executed. Within a very short time, as a result of only really very few convictions, the death penalty was abolished for all relevant purposes. And that has remained the position up until now. The death penalty is inherently and morally unacceptable. There is no reason why the state has to fall to the level of the perpetrator of a homicide. It is the duty of the state to promote life, not to take life under any circumstances, perhaps with the exception of war. And I've always been opposed and remain opposed to the death penalty. There are a number of countries that have a death penalty. Indeed, we cannot extradite from this country any person charged with murder unless there is a solemn and binding undertaking that the death penalty will not be asked for. It is quite simple. The death penalty is no more than retribution. It doesn't do anything for anyone and does not allow, in any circumstances, for an error which can subsequently be undone.
If I were to be charged with murder, what, I hear you cry, yes, it may well happen, what could be my possible defences?
I'd cover you with custard, then with cream, hundreds and thousands, and then some sponge cakes, and plead before the jury that they have to disregard trifles.
What would, in all seriousness, be your possible defences?
Several defences. You could claim self-defence if that were appropriate. You were defending yourself, a member of your family, or your property from an attack from someone who was intending to do harm to you. As the law says, you can't judge to a nicety how much force to use. You could claim some form of provocation. You can't claim duress or marital coercion, because that does not apply to murder. You could plead insanity, but of course that only reduces a conviction from murder to manslaughter and is not a complete defence. The main defence, of course, will be that you didn't actually intend to cause either death or really serious harm. And for that you need lawyers, good lawyers, and perhaps for something as serious as that, genuine lawyers with attitude.
What needs changing?
We need a fundamental change. We need to have different classifications of homicide. And in other words, a person knows with certainty, or as much certainty as possible, the consequences of his or her actions. So we have murder 1, intent to kill. Murder 2, intent to cause really serious harm. And murder 3, conspiracy to murder, setting up the murder. Murder 4, being concerned in perhaps transporting somebody to or from a homicide, knowing that in the first case murder may take place, in the second case that very serious harm may be caused. And in those circumstances, I think it is easier for everybody involved in a criminal case not only to understand what the issues are, but to reach a just verdict, and then any sentence upon conviction can also be just. Justice is not something you just rush through and hope for. Justice is far too important for that. That is effectively much the same as the American system, but with an English face. There's something a little unusual. Britain, of course, has a nice long history of using obscure terms and words, some of which didn't go across to America. And one of them I'm going to quote from a case in the 1670s. It's a man who was indicted, charged, with murder. And the indictment said that he had committed the offence not having the fear of God before his eyes, but being moved and instigated by the devil. A delightful concept, so archaic that it's beyond belief, but that I think explains, in some respects, how slowly the law has developed and why we've had this intent to kill and eventually intent to cause grievous bodily harm.
It's that time in the show, drum roll, it's Joke of the Week.
Let's make it nice and topical. Sadly, as you know, Hugo Chavez died. And I decided to commemorate that sad event by renaming my bath taps.
As we've been away for so long, as a special treat, I think we should have a second Joke of the Week.
It's all about what's been happening in the meat industry recently, and my very great concerns that things haven't been looked at properly. I'm worried about the amount of cottage in a cottage pie, how many shepherds you will find in a shepherd's pie, the number of fingers in a fish finger. I mean, this is really very, very worrying. And apparently last week, in some corn, they actually found some DNA of a rocking horse.
If you've got any questions on this show, you can tweet us at
the LWA. And those will get through to me with a rather boring picture of me. But there again, I'm a lawyer, so I'm deemed to be boring, really, aren't I?
Never, Julian.